Welcome to the Butter Notes podcast with three guys who have no business listening to music, much less talking about it.
Was he really serious being after you and putting the case in the court? Like, what is the actual problem between his orchestra and...
I don't know. I was just in a club once, trying to meet a friend.
Ну, честно сказать, непонятно. Я однажды был в клубе, должен был встретиться с другом.
I went into the bathroom.
Пошел в туалет.
I was going to take a pee.
Вот, ну, извините, мне приспичило.
Да. And there in the urinal, you know where you go, was this man. He was on his knees and his face was in the urinal.
Вот, и там еще стоял этот мужик, то есть лицом прямо в писсуаре на коленях.
It was like a horse when he drinks out of a trough, you know.
То есть очень похож был на лошадь, которая пьет из корыта.
And I thought maybe he passed out. Like, what the hell? Maybe I should help this guy.
Я так подумал, что, может быть, человеку плохо.
So I got his head and pulled it up. And it was Elton John.
Взял за волосы, значит, приподнял. Это был Элтон Джон.
Собственно говоря, hi, Elton John, how are you, man? And he turned to me and he spit on my face.
Вот, он ко мне повернулся и плюнул мне в лицо.
Вероятно, тем, что он пил из... Так. And that was that fight. That was it.
Oh, what a perfect
And we're back with the Butter Notes podcast episode on Mr. Bungle. This is Jim here with Jake and Tone. That was Mike Patton telling stories about Elton John and piss.
Yeah, what an apt introduction to this group. This is Jake, by the way.
Hey, look at you. You got it. You nailed it, man.
I said, I even in my head, I was like, I'm going to say it before I start talking, and then in the interim, like 2 seconds, I forgot, so.
It still would be better if
better.
you just weren't here, but that's better than the other.
I absolutely agree, yeah. I'm busy. This
is Tone, and Jake is not busy. I know that for a fact. And,
yeah, based on Jake's response time in our Discord, Jake is not busy.
I can put any bullshit imaginable into our Discord, and I will get a response within 30 seconds from Jake. He's not busy.
I'm just quick, guys. I don't know what to say.
And also, Mike Patton's story about Elton John is 99.9% sure it's absolute bullshit, and he was trying to, like, troll Russian television. So... There's a lot about that video I don't understand, which is why I love it so much.
There's a lot about Mr. Bungle that I don't understand, which is why I love it so much.
Yep, Mike Patton is an insane man, and that's why we love him. That'll be the theme for the evening.
Yeah, that's it. That's all we need to say. Goodbye, everybody. Yeah, this band is fucking deranged. Just. It's non-stop psychosis through the whole discography, except maybe on Wrath of the Easter Bunny. That's a brief respite from what is otherwise a psych ward of a discography.
Although Easter Bunny's pretty wild too, just in a different way. Just in a different way.
In a different way.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, should we just start off here in '91 with the debut?
The debut on Warner Brothers Records.
Produced by John Zorn.
Is this the That's right, produced by John Zorn. We got some Zorn sax all over.
There's some mystique surrounding this album. Some really weird confluence of fates and such. It's really strange how this came about.
Is that the dead goon on the album cover?
I think it's Mr. Bungle on the album cover.
No, Mr. Bungle is just... Well, I suppose that could be Mr. Bungle, because Mr. Bungle is a slovenly young boy who grows up to be a carny. Is that what they're getting at here?
Yeah. Mr. Bungle is the spiritual... I mean, he's the eponymous spiritual core of the group. A filthy, deranged young man who no one wants to be around.
Is it filthy and deranged not to comb your fucking hair like in that educational special?
Mr. Bungle never combed his hair.
So what are those sampled from anything, or are those original?
Yeah, no, that's a real video from the 50s. It was some school special about why you need to uphold
like cleanliness.
I don't know. Yeah, you have to have
hygiene.
Hygiene. Yeah, hygienic etiquette.
The samples on this album This is a really sample-heavy album in a way that was
Yeah.
somewhat revolutionary. We could maybe talk more about that. The samples are mainly from 1950s, like after-school special videos. Blue Velvet, the David Lynch movie, a lot of samples from that, and then just like random pornos from the 80s. Like most of the
Don't
samples are
forget
one of those
Super
three
Mario
things.
Brothers and NES 8-bit tracks. I missed that
Yeah.
on my first.
Oh yeah,
I
video
just
game
noticed
samples.
that. I don't know how I didn't recognize that, but yeah, there's Super Mario and a couple other weird 8-bit sounds in this as well.
Yeah, there's tons of that stuff in. I think it's Slowly Growing Deaf. They do a bunch of the 8-bit stuff.
And there's also the extremely long sample at the end of Egg that's just like a train going, which I don't know if that's from a movie or if it's just field recordings. But that's like in an album
I got the sense it's field recordings.
in an album that's like chock full of weird stuff. I feel like that long like ambient field recording section of Egg is like maybe the part of the album I understand the least, which is saying a lot. And it's not like the most arranged part of the album at all. But it's a very weird part of the album. It's like 2 or 3 minutes of just like a train like going on a track and like far off sounds of like people talking by the train tracks. It's such a weird part of the album, and like there's no rhyme or reason to it, and I feel like that's the case with a lot of this album. Like it's like controlled insanity, really, is what this album is.
So this album more than the others, I think, though, leans into that deranged circus carnival aesthetic. I would say like that's like the aesthetic or theme of this album. I mean, it hits you right off the start with quote unquote. It's just that like really. I don't know how to describe it or what the instruments are, but it's that characters like you know it when you hear it. It's like, oh yeah, that's carnival music. That's what you hear in a TV show or something like that. And then of course Carousel is like quintessentially like carnival music, but completely unhinged.
Yeah, this is an album where like a bunch of kids who are really, really just vulgar as hell, immature as hell, but also like really, really great players and songwriters like decide to make music. There aren't that many people who match that description, but these dudes on this album do.
Yeah, I mean, so that's the core is these three buddies from high school, Patton, Trace Bruance, and Trevor Dunn. I think they're the only three that are on every album.
Yeah, they're the core.
Yeah.
And also like a core, like I don't know what their relationship was with Zorn before this album, but those three dudes are like part of the inner circle of musicians who work with Zorn up to this day.
Yep.
So like extremely influential people in like underground avant-garde rock music, and this is really where it all starts with them. We get Patton a little bit earlier on The Real Thing by Faith No More, which was like a really big album, and he was really young when that came out. And then I feel like this is the first album where we're really seeing like the true Mike Patton. Not that it's like a false Mike Patton on The Real Thing, but he didn't write any of that music.
Yeah, they hired him for Faith No More.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, this album is like the full-length commercial debut of like uncensored Mike Patton, and it's pretty terrifying.
I didn't believe it that he was.
The world was never the same.
When I first found Mr. Bungle, which was by complete chance, I think it was just part of my search, like broaden my musical horizons. And this, I mean, it says something about me that I found it so easily, I guess. But I listened to it for a couple years before. I guess James brought it up and mentioned you ever listen to Mr. Bungle, and I was like, oh yeah, that album's fucking crazy. And he goes, yeah, that's Mike Patton from Faith No More, and I was like, that doesn't track to at all. Like I didn't know. Like I never looked into the history of the band or something. So if you're familiar with Patton from Faith No More, this is a completely jarring transition from. I mean, vocally, like the vocal styles, obviously there. He's got amazing range, and he showcases that in both projects. But yeah, in terms of like the writing and the approach to the music, it's completely different, and it might surprise you if you hadn't known that bit of trivia.
Yeah, Patton can make any sound with his voice, it would seem.
Yeah, and I think the only other person I can compare him to as a vocalist I can think of is Serge from System of a Down. Just the amount of range, the amount of for him to like seamlessly go through different vocal styles in one sort of breath, to pack as many into a single track and have it work. Really the only other, and I guess right, yeah, System's Warner Brothers outfit as well. So I think if I'm saying that correctly.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I'm not going to look it up though.
Yeah, me either. Don't fact check me, just take it as fact.
Mike Patton is, like, I would say Surge would probably be the only other singer I could think of who was like approaches the level of insanity of Mike Patton. But honestly, if you look at the entirety of Patton's oeuvre, from this to stuff he's done with Zorn to like some of his solo work, it's crazy. It's ridiculous. Like, there are very few legitimately avant-garde artists who are like as well known as Mike Patton. And you can't claim that he's anything less than like a bona fide avant-garde musician. And you can tell listening to this first Bungle album, I think.
Yeah,
it's funny. Like, I think this one is a little bit more straightforward. I mean, definitely than Disco Volante. Like, the songs are I think are more palatable. Like, if I was going to tell somebody to listen to Mr. Bungle for the first time, I'd tell them to listen to the debut. But you do get inklings of it in certain places, like parts of Slowly Growing Deaf, definitely Dead Goon.
My Ass is on Fire is heavy as fuck.
Yeah, it is. So is Love's a Fist.
Yeah, there's almost no Love is a Fist is probably the heaviest song. Like, almost every genre that like existed in the underground in 1991 is like, I feel like in some ways present on this album. From metal to like avant-garde jazz to like, there's like klezmer music and carnival music. There's like music concrete and ambient, as I talked about before. There's like weird mashups of sampling. There's like some weird electronic stuff. Like, this album is like, and the fact that this album works is like somewhat miraculous, honestly. I always feel that way whenever I listen to it.
It's very coherent too. Like, as a piece, like the album as a whole makes sense, which itself doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, like it's like presenting a kind of like derangement that is relatable almost. Like, I feel like a lot of people like have weird emotions and thoughts that are present on here, which is why I think it resonates with a lot of people. And
if you were at one point a 14 or 15-year-old boy, I would say.
Yeah, and that's when I first started listening to this stuff, James, too.
Same. Yep.
No, I was 21 or so when I was like, oh yeah, this resonates with me.
So slightly less deranged, but not by far.
No, probably more deranged, if anything.
Yeah, I got into this when I was 14, and I was like, I did like a lot of progressive rock at the time. I always have since I was a kid. But at the time, I was like really into like nu metal and metal in general. But I loved like Korn and Mudvayne, Lamb of God, that sort of stuff. So I liked
Lamb of
heavy
God
music.
fans are screeching right now.
Yeah, Lamb of God is not as far away from nu metal as Randy Blythe would like to claim. I don't think that's a bad thing. I like nu metal music. That was the kind of stuff that I really loved because I was 14 in 2007, so that stuff was popular at the time and I loved it. And this album was like sort of an entryway into experimental music for me because it had that stupidity and the vulgar quality and like the metal element, because this album is at least partially a metal album. But it has so much else in there, and it was like really kind of like a door for me into experimental music. This album, more this and Lark's Tongue's Nest picked by King Crimson, two really formative albums for me. I listened to when I was a young teenager that like introduced me to the wilder side of progressive music. I think that's probably true for Jim as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Those two albums in particular. I think you identified Lark's Tongues as the gateway to avant-garde music for progressive fans once, and I think that's exactly right. This is too, but in a different way. I mean, this is just so fucked up. This album, Lark's Tongues is jarring and challenging, but it's not really fucked up. This album's fucked up.
Oh, this album's fucked up. Yeah, like
this album is fucked up.
I learned today that how you interact with and enjoy a piece of music partly or wholly depends on your mood. Like, I can recognize this stuff is great. I know I love this stuff, but I was not in the mood to take this on and listen to it today. It was a bit of a chore. Just not good, relaxing music in any way.
What kind of
like
mood
if you're
were you
stressed
in?
out at work? If you're stressed out at work, I'm talking like actually stressed out. You're like, I need to like take some of the edge off. You should not listen to "Squeeze Me Macaroni" by Mr. Bungle. It's a great track and you'll have fun with it in the right context, but it's not that one. I couldn't do it.
Patton fucking like with the high pitched screaming in your ears while you're trying to work.
Not a great time.
God,
I remember
the tempo.
I felt that way when we did the System of a Down episode a few months ago.
Yeah.
I was really busy at work, and I was listening to the first album. I was like, "Why am I so stressed out right now?
Free
Why
thinkers
am I
are
so on
dangerous."
edge?"
Oh God, and especially if you know the lyrical content. Like I was talking about. I said, yeah, I just can't hear samples of dude having diarrhea and talking about breeding Betty Crocker. Like, I know that's what's going on in the music. Like, I've read the lyrics.
I want to make love to your beautiful body.
Yeah, it was.
Oh, Mr. Bungle.
It's not what I needed at that moment in time. But I listened to these well enough. I was like, I'm fine to talk about these, but I'm not brushing up on it.
I want to make love to you.
Oh yeah, no, I love this album so much. I could pretty much listen to this anytime. Like,
Squeeze Me Macaroni is insane. Like, the tempo is the speed at which Patton is spitting out those lyrics is truly astonishing. And he's actually saying
he's the greatest
words.
rapper of all time. Yeah, he's the greatest rapper of all time.
Like, he actually is saying the words. Like, if you follow along with the lyric sheet, like, he is actually speaking all of that. I don't know how he does. It's honestly like a technical tour de force vocally, and it just also happens to be like just stupid beyond all reason. And
I played
that's the core of this album.
Rich and descriptive.
It does paint a picture. It does.
One way, yeah. I mean,
just all about fucking people.
Conjures
with food.
all sorts of imagery.
Betty Crocker.
So
It's
completely surreal. I played Squeezing Macaroni for my dad, and he was like, "Is he the best rapper of all time?" He said something like that. It's like what you just said, James, and I was like, "Probably, I don't know."
I'm reading these lyrics right now. It's so fucked up.
I can never tell if it's about fucking food, like actually like having sex with food, or if it's about like fucking another person with food involved.
No, it's about Betty Crocker. I want to lock Betty Crocker in the kitchen and knock her upper during supper, clutter up her butter gutter, said hostess ding dong, wrapped an egg roll around my wong.
Yeah, so don't listen to this if you're stressed at work, I'm telling you. I mean, or do, you can have a good time with it, but...
The butter gutter.
Egg is another highly sexual
Christ.
but disturbing song. The lyrics for that are difficult to stomach.
The Girls of Porn, however, is purely academic and
that's
dry.
intellectual music. Yeah,
Girls?
The second half of the album, especially "My Ass Is on Fire," is high art.
The Girls of Porn is an amazing song. Like, it's really gross, and it's just about jerking off. Obviously, that's what it's about. But it's actually like an amazing, catchy song that like, it's like an incredible funk song. It's like a really complicated and progressive funk song.
Yeah, I mean it's got the funk of the Rick James tune, especially with that horn, with the way the horn section plays, with the real chunky guitar comping in the verses.
Yeah, it's catchy as hell. Like if
Patton is so dynamic on that tune too. Like the way he flows in and out of falsetto during the pre-chorus.
And the way that they structure the samples, the way that like all the porno samples sort of like weave in and out. It's like they sort of happen like mid-verse. Like Patton will like sing a couple bars and then you'll have a sample and then it'll just like return to the verse. Like the way that they like work the samples into it is really, really funny because the samples are funny porno samples. But it's also super creative and like pretty complicated.
So is this,
like you kind of have to like when you go into this album, you kind of have to like choose before it starts like how you want to appreciate it. You have to be like, I want to laugh at it, or you have to decide like I want to like actually listen to the like how the compositions work and like be more serious about it. You have to like make that choice almost. I feel like
I don't know. I think you can do both because the funny parts aren't as the funny parts are just so different from like the ambient bits in Slowly Growing Deaf or in Dead Goon.
I was going to compare.
It's hard to listen to those as if they're funny in the same way.
But The Girls of Porn is really the entirety of it is funny, but it's also like a complex composition. And it's hard to feel both ways about it at the same time. I feel like I can because I'm kind of used to doing stuff like that because I've listened to this for so many years and I've like listened to Zappa for so many years. So like I kind of have the head for it. Yeah. But even sometimes here going into this, despite my experience with music like this, I feel like I sometimes have to like choose what lens I want to view it in before I start listening to it.
Yeah, so the two artists I think of course I mentioned System of a Down. That's unhinged in a different way, a more overtly political way. I don't know if this is political at all, but the others is Frank Zappa, and we mentioned him in the jazz rock episode. Is you kind of got this like beautiful composition playing, and then the lyrics are just absurd. The only difference here is that you don't have that sort of stark contrast in a lot of places. It's like the lyrics are deranged and the music is deranged, even though it's really good. But it's like the aesthetic kind of matches that. In Zappa, I kind of get this dissonance almost where I'm listening to the lyrics and they're just completely ridiculous, and there's just like this like groovin' blues track underneath it or something like that, and you kind of get those two sides of it. But with this, I don't get as much of that, especially at the humorous parts, like we were saying.
Another difference, I think, in the type of psychosis with Mr. Bungle is the violence in the lyrics. There's a real depravity to Mr. Bungle in a way that's different from Zappa.
It's metal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's no blood and guts in Zappa. There's plenty of blood and guts in Mr. Bungle.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely
there's
sex.
There's a certain amount of depravity. Yeah, I was gonna say,
but not to the same degree as
but
this.
not violence. Yeah, but not violence. Yeah. There's a violence to Mr. Bungle.
Yeah, it's like a serial killer almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Serial killer clown. It's John Wayne Gacy, and it's that sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of like Pink Cigarette or pretty much any track from the debut. Yeah. What else is fucked up on this album? The hushed vocals in The Girls of Porn are pretty fucked up, where Patton is listing various acts in which they might engage.
Several of which are not legal.
No.
Oh, the part
should not be.
So he in Love is a Fist, he goes, I feel strongly about violence, and then he says love is a fist like 3 times. It's pretty dark.
Is there anything wholesome on this album? Maybe Stub a Dub. It's about a dog. About a 3-legged dog.
Stub a Dub is like weirdly like the most disturbing part of the album, like because it is kind of sincere. But I can't really tell if it is sincere. Stub-a-Dub is like a very, very unsettling song for me to listen to.
Especially the family parts where they just say family over and over in different ways.
Family, yeah. Stub-a-Dub is like, I forget about it a lot when I even think about this album. It is it's a great track, but it is definitely like a very unsettling track for me.
Yeah, this album is from hell. That's just all I can think of.
It's very 90s.
Like,
I feel like there was so much deranged stuff in the culture at large in the 90s in a way that I think is awesome. And I feel like this album is like sort of like a hideous beginning birth of 90s subversive media. It might even be more influential in that regard than people might realize.
It's like stillbirth of the early 90s.
Yeah, like the gross stillbirth of the early 90s. Because like when you look at like if you look at like Korn and Limp Bizkit and like that sort of like punkish, like super vulgar, heavy music that became popular in the 90s, like it's obviously not as sophisticated as this, like not even close. But I feel like you can definitely trace a lineage back to this when you listen to that stuff.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think I don't remember when I had the occasion to say this, but I think Bungle is like sort of it's sort of a summary of the whole decade. The Bungle discography from the 90s is a pretty decent summary of what's happening in music in the 1990s.
In rock,
and what's
music.
gonna come in the 2000s.
Yeah. In rock music, I would say. Well, even there might be some it was mentioned there's crossover in hip hop.
There's crossover. There's electronic music in this. There's chamber music in the Bungle discography. It covers so much ground.
It covers a huge amount of ground. And for culture in general in the 90s, like the aesthetic of like those kind of like of like 90s Nickelodeon, where like the shows were like kind of subversive, like Ren and Stimpy and like Rocko's Modern Life, like those like really Real Monsters, like those really surreal kind of subversive cartoons that were on Nickelodeon in the 90s. I see that aesthetic on this album too.
Or Tarantino in film.
Tarantino, yeah,
I definitely see that.
Like I'm not saying that like this album like made all of that stuff happen, but I do think that it like encapsulates a lot of what the culture was going through at this like around this time and foreshadowed a lot.
I definitely agree.
Well, this is sort of under the radar release, even though it came out on Warner Brothers, right? I mean, it was in the shadow of a lot of rock music that was going on at the time. I mean, we haven't mentioned the Red Hot Chili Pepper stuff, which you might save to later.
They got hooked up with Warner Brothers because Patton was with Faith No More, who were a hit. The Real Thing was a big fucking hit, especially with Epic, and they were basically like, do whatever you have to make Patton happy so we can keep cashing checks on Faith No More. And that turned into the Mr. Bungle discography.
It's we'll talk about this more at Disco Volante, but it is like a pretty unique moment in like major label music. Like almost nothing. You would probably have to go to like jazz or classical to find something even close to this weird that's been released on a major label, especially with Disco Volante, which we'll probably talk about in more detail.
Well, speaking of that, I remembered System was on Columbia, and I got that mixed up because I always associate Rick Rubin with Warner Brothers, even though that's not the case. But similar in that they're both released on major labels, and we wondered in System of a Down how that stuff in that episode how it became as popular. This is not as nearly as popular as System was in the early 2000s, but there's enough comparisons there to make that interesting, I think.
Well, this seems like as decent as any segue into Disco Volante. We're going to jump ahead, 4 years? Was this 95? Yeah, 95 we get Disco Volante, which in many ways manages to become even more deranged than the debut.
But in a different way. This album isn't really funny. And it's not really vulgar.
No. It's dark.
Well, there are vulgar moments, like everyone I went to high school with is dead.
Yeah, but
it's not funny in the same way. I definitely agree.
So I think we mentioned before, this album sonically is different. Mike Patton is experimenting with his vocals, but is almost using it. He kind of takes the lyrical themes. This is why I mentioned it's not as much like, I don't think get the deranged carnival aesthetic on this as much as, because it seems to me that Patton is using his vocals in a lot of cases as a sort of additional like layer or texture or even an instrument of some kind, rather it being kind of focal point. Kind of blends into the mix, not in a bad way, like it's obscured or something, but it kind of it gels really well with what the composition's doing. I think I see that more on this album.
There are a lot of tracks on this album that don't even have lyrics, like that have just wordless vocals, and there are a ton of tracks on this album where all of the lyrics are not in English.
Right.
This album, Disco Volante, is an utterly insane album. Like, it's an overwhelming album to try to talk about because it touches on so many different styles. Like, almost every single style of avant-garde music you can imagine, it happens at some point on this album. It's honestly like an enormous achievement in that regard.
The journey through the first 8 tracks, from Everyone I Went to High School With Is Dead up to the Bends, covers just an unbelievable amount of ground in terms of compositional style. They do everything in those 8 tracks. And the Bends is its own whole monster, but it's like a monster of its own that needs to be evaluated.
That's an opus, right? Like that's his.
Yeah, the Bends is like a microcosm of Disco Volante, I think.
Yeah, the Bends is like avant-garde classical minimalism, like full stop. It's not like rock influenced by avant-garde classical minimalism. It's just that.
Yeah.
Like, it's art music pretty much entirely, at least in my opinion.
And then there's a song about masturbating.
And that goes without saying.
Yeah. Farting, pissing, and stroking my fucking dick.
I feel like it like one way to talk about this album would just be like to go through each track and like talk about the different styles that are occurring on each track, and it would be like you could like just doing that would probably take like 15 minutes, but it would like almost make the album sound like it's a total mess, but it isn't. And like
no, it's
I don't
beautiful.
like it's hard to like really explain how it like why this album works and how it works. Because a lesser band trying to do something like this would have failed so badly. And on paper, I feel like it sounds like it would be terrible, but it's obviously I mean, it's a masterpiece. I feel like it's widely acclaimed as such. But I don't know if I can like really explain why it works.
Well, if you see on Jimbo's screen here, this person says any attempt at trying to understand this is wrong. So maybe that sums it up.
I think that's right. Honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, this is a much more challenging album than the debut, I think.
I didn't get turned on to this. I heard the self-titled in California long before I heard this. I didn't hear this until last year, maybe. James, you and I did an episode where you brought this in. I think. And I listened through it, and yeah, it was sonically just completely different from the other two. I've had more time to sit with it, and it quickly became my favorite. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, this is probably my favorite too.
Yeah, I was not ready for this album when I was 14, because I remember I fell in love with the self-titled Bungle album when I was 14, and then I moved on to this one, and I was not ready for it. Like, the seeds had been planted in me to like get into experimental music, but I did not have the experience yet when I first heard this. That was probably the case for a lot of people who came to this either through the first Bungle album or came to this through Faith No More, had no idea what to do with it. I would venture, and I'm not the only person who's claimed this, but I would venture that this is probably the most challenging, at least most challenging rock labeled album that's ever been released on a major label.
I mean, nothing else comes to mind.
I don't have enough of a reference to
Nothing
dispute it,
else
but it wouldn't
even comes to
surprise me
mind.
if that's the case. Yeah. I do know this is on a major label and it's extremely challenging, so that wouldn't surprise me if that were the case.
I mean, there's some Zappa stuff on the big labels, but it's not as difficult as this. It's not nearly as difficult as this.
No, I mean, and like you could probably find like some like free jazz album that's been released on a major label that might be more difficult than this, but within the rock context, even though it's debatable whether or not this even is a rock album, but it was definitely marketed as a rock album. So within the rock context, I cannot even think of anything that comes even close to this that's as experimental that came out on a major label.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be pretty fucked up to like Carry Stress in the Jaw. Something's wrong. If you listen to Carry Stress in the Jaw and you're like, this is for me.
And we all feel that way, so and we're all fucked up. So
yeah, exactly.
And the moment at the end of the moment in Violencia Domestica where he goes escorta, where he's like kissing the mic basically. That shit hurts your ears, dude.
It's the first attempt at ASMR in history, perhaps.
It's patent ASMR.
Yeah.
Like he had to have been his mouth had to have been touching the mic when he recorded that. That's how close he was to the mic.
All the way up. Yeah.
And he clicks his tongue so close to the mic. Escorta.
And there's no background noise or interference or anything. It's just the voice, the whisper.
It's totally a cappella.
It's also fully in Italian, isn't it? Isn't every word of that song in Italian?
Yeah, we looked up the lyrics one time, and they're not good. I mean,
Patton's fluent in Italian.
He
did that Mondo Cane album, which is fucking awesome.
Yeah, he did an album in 2010 of just covers of Italo pop songs called Mondo Cane, which is fucking awesome. Definitely recommend it. I feel like a lot of Patton fans haven't heard that album.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The song I always gravitate toward, because I'm looking at this, this is anachronistic, but Desert Search for Techno has the Arabian influence on it. And then there's a band I've mentioned before, we've listened to once, Igor, right? The breakcore, like, almost, and they were heavily influenced by Mr. Bungle, and a lot of their tracks, especially on their latest release, are in the vein of that track. So I go back and listen to that, and I see how formative it is. I mean, it's, aside from just being an excellent track and really standing well, like with the rest of them, so it's like standing independently yet flowing really well with the tracks that precede it. It's just a really interesting placement on the record.
Yeah, Desert Search for Technoala is my favorite track on this album, and possibly my favorite Bungle track. That's a Spruance track, and Spruance is like very heavily interested in like Arabic music and Middle Eastern music, which his own band that he formed after Bungle, Secret Chiefs 3, is like almost entirely influenced by Arabic and Middle Eastern music. And that influence is coming across a lot on this album, especially on Desert Search for Technoala, which is like it's kind of like an IDM song with like avant-garde and sort of like Middle Eastern influences, and it's an incredible song. It's hard to describe, really. And like really like all, especially Dunn, like the core of the band, Dunn, Patton, and Spruance, are like every single niche thing that they're interested in, they were like totally free to express it on this album. And it's like a really beautiful artifact in that regard, because it's just like a band that's just like totally indulging in all of their weird little obsessions and putting it on the album. And just because, I don't know, maybe just because they're so good at what they do, or just because they had good chemistry, or I don't know exactly how, but somehow it all gels together and it works.
Yeah, you have to have people who are on the same wavelength as you, who also play music, and in the same time and place as you, who like, yeah, let's write an album and do this. There's, in some ways, it if you think about it like that, it may not be that surprising that it worked once it came together. Just people as proficient as they are, who are in the same wavelength and wanting to write and approach music this way. Not to take anything away from it, just in that light, it's, I think it's maybe more for the course than you'd expect. And
they had like an unprecedented budget, as we already
True.
talked about, because this had major label backing. so they were able to basically do whatever they wanted to do. It's like,
Yeah, and that's how you end up with.
I'm repeating
lyrics
myself
like
basically,
on-
but it's really a unique artifact in popular music, this album.
Yeah, that's how you end up
music
with
in general,
lyrics
honestly.
to Mamishka Mau Squaws, which is complete gibberish. I think. I don't think there's any rhyme or reason
I'm pretty
to
sure
the
it's complete gibberish.
lyrics.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could hear things in it, and you're like, oh, but yeah, I think it's complete. It's like it's just an abstract, or it's like a Rorschach. You just like, you might hear certain things in it, but they're not really there.
What the hell is happening on the album cover?
It's one of those
I
deep
love
sea
this
fish.
cover.
What is that?
It's
a
like
fish.
a dried out viper fish.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
I don't know why it's hooked around this person's eye, but yeah.
It's very Italian, this cover. It's like very much like, I don't know the particular art movement. My art history is not very good, but it is like very much of the Italian avant-garde of like the mid 20th century. This album cover, it fits. Particularly the patent heavy songs on this album very much fit the aesthetic of this cover, in my opinion.
Well, with that in mind, I think all of the album covers, the first 3 LPs. That we have to say that now, but the first 3 LPs, the album cover perfectly match then the sort of aesthetic that the albums are going for, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, these 3 albums, like, there's a coherence to each one of them that's separate from the other 2. Like the discography. Well, I keep saying that. I mean, there's Raging Wrath now too, but like of the '90s stuff, it's like each of them is in this fucked up different setting. You got the carnival on the first album. Disco Volante is like some kind of haunted mansion in northern Italy from the 1500s.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then California is like a California backyard purgatory.
Or like a vice cop, like the aesthetic of chasing like cocaine drug lords, and like it's very 80s. I get from that, and the first album is I think of like cruel 1950s science or something like that. You know what I mean? Like institutional, like abuse and things like that, mental institutions, that sort of thing.
Did you all see Nightmare Alley, that new Guillermo del Toro movie?
No, I
haven't. Yeah,
so just the reason I think of it is in the movie there's a theme about the geek. You're introduced to the geek in one of the very first scenes. The geek is basically a crazy guy that one of the carnies puts on a show with, where he like eats a chicken alive and shit. Basically just this total lunatic put on display for a crowd of carnival goers, and that guy's the geek.
Yeah.
Guy on the first Mr. Bungle cover, that's the geek.
Yeah, it's like this, like there's like this like almost like hidden pure id depravity going on all 3 of these albums, but just manifesting in different ways.
Yeah. Yeah, Disco Volante, man, it's just I don't know how to encapsulate Disco Volante. It's terrifying and beautiful, and I love it.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way to like really prepare anyone for it in a way that doesn't sound like hyperbole. But it really is that crazy.
Yeah.
It really is that eclectic. It really is that bizarre and unique. Like, it really is all that stuff. And like, if for someone who's never heard it, would probably be skeptical of that it actually is all that stuff, because I know I would be if I heard all of that and I'd never heard it before. But it really is all of those things.
Do you think this is music that people can work that like? There's some stuff that's an acquired taste, but I'm not so sure that like I feel like this stuff might be a barrier to entry for a number of people. Like they might say, you know, the composition's good, or they're obviously good players, or the vocals or whatever. Just the overall aesthetic of it. I wonder if there's just bars some people out from. Like you gotta like you said, you know, if you're a 14-year-old boy and have all these crazy thoughts and stuff, and it resonates with you at some core or something like that. Like I wonder if you have to have that on hand to be able to enjoy this. I still think that doesn't mean it's good or bad. Like, yeah, I still think it's great music regardless. But I do wonder. Like, it seems to me at times to be that challenging.
It's an acquired taste.
You have to be of a certain disposition to like any avant-garde music. I think. I don't think anybody could like find something to appreciate about avant-garde music.
You have to be willing to put in the time.
It's not a yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true.
Well, and you have to want to like it. Right?
Exactly.
Like I think it's a certain person. I think it's a certain personality type that's prone to like that's open to liking something like this. And it's not a value judgment. I think it's just a fact that there are certain fucked up people who like avant-garde music. And if you're like that, you'll find something. I think you can find something to love about Disco Volante.
Yeah, I mean, my reference for avant-garde isn't very deep, but I think of, I don't know, the first one that comes to mind is Blue Lambency Downward, which was a really difficult and challenging album for me the first time I listened to it by K.O. Dot. And I don't know, I get the impression there it's more ambient and like tender than this. I guess my thought is just the aesthetic, that like the approach to it is just being depraved, like disgusting. I feel like that in and of itself might be a barrier for a lot of people. Someone who might be able to acquire the taste for avant-garde music in this case might not be able to. I wonder about that. I don't have any test subjects. I mean, I'm not asking anyone to try it and let me know, but I'm just. I just get that impression when I listen to this. It's challenging in a different way.
I think anyone who has a pre-existing taste for experimental music that has not heard this already is going to probably like it.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I think that someone who either has not yet developed a taste for it or never will is not going to like it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But it's like an extremely... I mean, I think quality is subjective, but there is at least a big intersubjective agreement among a large amount of people that this is a really good experimental album. And so, like, almost anyone who likes that sort of thing, I think, will love it. Most people who like that sort of thing have probably already heard it. So, like, preaching to the converted already in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thing here. Mr. Bungle's a big name. I mean, all three of these albums are in the top 100 for their year. Well, all three of the 90s albums are in the top 100 for their year on Radio Music.
Yeah, if you're a music nerd, you probably like all three Mr. Bungle albums.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably. Are any of them bolded?
All three of them are. The first one might not be. I think it is, though.
Yeah, all three of them are.
Yeah.
All three of the 90s albums.
Yeah, surprisingly, California. Well, maybe not so surprisingly, but...
So let's move on here to California. This seems to be the most popular of the three of them.
I think it's most palatable.
The three big 90s albums. Yeah, sometimes I don't know. I think I would think the debut would be easier for some people than California, but maybe not.
For a 14-year-old boy like we were, the first one is more palatable.
Yeah. Sweet Charity, and then you got Retro Vertigo, which is a pretty damn big song. Yeah, I think there's more.
That's the Avenged Sevenfold song, right? Retro Vertigo.
Yeah, and then Mr. Bungle stole it. Owes them royalties on it. M. Shadows did that way better than Patton ever could.
I would say M. Shadows is a superior singer to Mike Patton in every.
Yeah, but you don't need to say it.
It goes without saying.
Yeah, exactly.
It goes without saying.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
Pink Cigarette is also like I don't know how accessible Pink Cigarette is, but Pink Cigarette is so good that I feel like it. I feel like you'd have to be just like have no taste at all to like hear Pink Cigarette and like think it's not good. You might not think it's like it might not be your thing, but like you'd have to be like kind of stupid to listen to it and like not think it's good. I don't even believe in feeling that way. The Pink Cigarette is so good that like it like stands on its own in that regard.
Yeah, I mean Pink Cigarettes, Sweet Charity, Retro Vertigo. Those songs have this kind of classic sound to them that I think would make them pretty palatable for someone who's even modestly interested in music.
Yeah, Patton's a fan of traditional pop, as we talked about with the Mondo Cane album.
Yeah.
And this is the album where like his interest in traditional pop comes through in the Bungle discography, because there's none of that on the other two.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense because since they did steal their sound from Red Hot Chili Peppers and Anthony Kiedis, so it makes sense that this is, you know, for the masses in that way.
As opposed to the true experimental bands.
Would you like to do the honors, James?
Dare we talk about that ridiculous fucking controversy?
I feel like we have to.
That never should have been a controversy.
Yeah, no, but it's really well. Depends on who you are.
Yeah, I mean, long story short, so the story goes, Anthony Kiedis accused Patton of ripping off his style in the music video for Epic by Faith No More. And so then when Bungle was going to release California in 1999, it was supposed to release the same week as Californication by Red Hot Chili Peppers. So they pushed the release out a week. The record company did, Warner Brothers. And then supposedly, Kiedis had Mr. Bungle booted from some festival that they were both gonna play at. I guess Kiedis was like, either get Chili Peppers or Bungle, but if Bungle's on there, we're gonna drop out. And that erupted into a many-year controversy. And it seems like it's all just pretty stupid. And like apparently everyone else in Red Hot Chili Peppers basically said that they didn't give a fuck, and Anthony Kiedis was just being a junky fucking pretty boy diva. And I think the manager for Red Hot Chili Peppers even said that. But it pissed off the guys at Mr. Bungle pretty good.
That was their bread, yeah. They didn't make a lot.
Understandably, getting booted from a festival if you're a professional musician is a big deal.
Yeah, and obviously
especially if you're playing.
Obviously, the organizers are going to pick
avant-garde music. You need the fucking gig.
Yeah, and obviously the organizers are going to pick the Red Hot Chili Peppers over Bungle when it's the cash on the line.
You didn't mention the homage that Bungle played to Red Hot Chili Peppers in the live show, which can be found on YouTube if you're interested.
Yeah, Bungle dresses up as Chili Peppers for Halloween and plays a bunch of their songs. It's pretty awesome.
It pretends to shoot heroin and overdose.
Yeah, they were.
Don't sit on the information. Like that was
so
the thrust of it. Like it wasn't just them dressing up.
They were pretty.
That's
mad.
what makes that funny or interesting.
They were pretty mad, pretty understandably mad. I also made the mistake of reading Anthony Kiedis' fucking stupid autobiography when I was like 19, so I know what he thinks and what he thinks about himself, and that makes me think that one side of this story is probably the right one, but I don't know. I also just don't really give a fuck.
Yeah, I don't want to take sides. It's yeah, I don't know. It's drama, I guess, if you like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean,
that
some people
30 years ago.
Some people claim that like that beef kind of ended the career of Bungle. I don't know how true that is, but some people like blame Anthony Kiedis for ending
that's what Trevor
the band.
Dunn says.
That's what who says?
Yeah, Trevor Dunn says that.
Yeah.
Trevor Dunn.
I mean, I would take his comment seriously, and I'd have to like really look into the history closely to have a fully fledged opinion. But I think it might be partially true. I'd be skeptical to say that it's entirely true.
Yeah,
Well,
I don't know.
This is the last like proper release really we get from these guys. I mean, yeah, of course we get
22 years.
Yeah.
But a lot of people call this their magnum opus, and it very well may be. I mean, it's a masterpiece.
It really is. Yeah, I mean, there's a beauty to California that I don't think you get as much on the debut or Disco Volante. Like there's a real classic beauty that's not quite so challenging on this one.
And pretty much
like
every
it's
track,
still dark.
Every track are songs. Like it's 10 songs.
Yeah.
Whereas Disco Volante, like really none of them are songs. They're like compositions, really. This here, I mean,
Yeah, I mean this is
there
still
are some weird
still
songs.
dark and challenging. None of them knew they were robots is challenging. Golem 2 is challenging. The Holy Filament is challenging. Goodbye Sober Day is challenging, but it's not Carry Stress in the Jaw. It's just not as difficult on the ears, I think, compared to Disco Volante.
Golem 2 is challenging, but it's also like kind of weird and funny and fun in a challenging way.
Yeah, definitely.
It's not like I don't think any of this is even close to as challenging as Disco Volante, even the weirdest tracks.
I agree. Yeah, I really think there's a beauty to this that sets it apart from the other two. It's not quite as deranged.
It's sincere.
Like there are moments there are moments on the Holy Filament that are just sublime. Like kind of breathtaking.
Especially compared to the first Bungle album, like this one is like the first Bungle album, while like they're taking the music seriously, it's a heavily ironic album and like not a sincere album. Whereas California is like a very sincere album, like emotionally and in terms of the sound. You can tell that they're. Yeah, I mean they're not kids
that's a
anymore.
line in Retro Vertigo. Yeah, that's a line in Retro Vertigo. Post-ironic remains a mouth to feed. Yeah, I mean, shit. This is 8 years after the debut.
Yeah, so you're losing kind of like the youthful exuberance of the debut, but you're gaining a lot of other really valuable stuff in its place.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like pretty amazing to hear like how they grew up between this final Bungle album and the first Bungle album. It's like a pretty astonishing trilogy taken as a whole unit, these three albums.
It's not a trilogy anymore.
Yeah, it's not a trilogy anymore.
It's still
Perhaps
a trilogy.
That's
Anthony C.
Perhaps that's our segue.
Look at his face. C.
No, it's still a trilogy. You can point out trilogies and bands that have 20 albums. Just because an album came after.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
No, I agree.
And this is so. Now we're segueing now into Raging Wrath of the Easter Bunny from 2021, and this is a re-recording of a demo they did in the 80s with a bunch of thrash tunes on it. I mean, this is just a thrash album.
Straight up thrash metal.
Yeah, this is a straight up thrash metal album with the core of Mr. Bungle, Patton, Spruance, and Dunn, plus Scott Ian from Anthrax and Dave Lombardo from Slayer and a bunch of other stuff. And a couple Patton projects, I think. Isn't he in Phantomos? It's either Phantomos or Tomahawk.
Dave Lombardo is in Phantomos, yeah.
Yeah, Phantomos, yeah. So they basically went back and re-recorded this demo they put out in the 80s with all their thrash tunes and released it as a new LP. And I was reading interviews about this one earlier. Like, they were basically like, "This is something we've been wanting to do for years. Like, we wanted to do good recordings of these songs. We wanted to give them their due, and now we can." I think it was Trevor Dunn who said, "Now we can die happy," or now I don't actually. He just said, "Now we can die," which I don't think is a distinction without a difference. But yeah, I mean, it's a thrash album. It's nothing like the first three records.
Should they have made this? Obviously, they have a right to do it and whatnot. Yeah, should they have done it?
Yeah, I'd say yes.
I wish that they would not have done it. Even though I like this album, it's a fun thrash album. I don't think they should have made it.
Yeah, about a year later, we're still in disagreement about it.
I disagree too. I mean, it's totally their prerogative.
Of course, it's their prerogative.
Oh, it's not even that.
It's just my opinion that they shouldn't have made it.
No, I think I don't see why. I don't have any reason why they shouldn't have this. These are good. These are good thrash tunes. There's nothing wrong with them. I mean, it's not the peak of thrash metal or anything like that, but they're good thrash tunes.
Yeah, they wanted to record it. They wanted to record it high quality. They wanted to put up the money to do it.
I
totally up to them.
understand why they wanted to make it, and I respect
no.
that. But they had.
But what's
like a
what's
really,
the should of that? What's the should in your question?
They had like a really flawless catalog. Maybe the most legendary run in underground rock music ever. Like a really fascinatingly complicated trilogy of albums that speak to each other in like a really, really interesting ways. That is just this untouchable small discography in experimental rock, maybe the best. And then there's this weird kind of addendum to it now. That it just it doesn't like hurt the legacy of the other three because those albums are the same, but it's just like it's this weird addendum that is now technically part of the discography, but like it's not really. Like, does anyone really think of this as like a Bungle album proper? Like, I don't think anyone really does. And like,
well, I mean,
other than
made
technically,
Well, in that
they made it in the 80s.
in that respect, then
They just all they did is re-record
Yeah,
it. Like there's
this stuff's already been-
the recording was already existed.
yeah, and in that respect,
It's just that I don't think people listen to it.
in that respect, I mean, if it's only part of the discography is a technicality, then I don't really see why it would be an issue. Like, it doesn't really count or something. It's like, okay, well then it doesn't really affect the other three albums. I just look at it like this is a group that I like, and they put out a thrash metal record. Cool. I don't know. There's nothing more to it than me. Yeah, please do that. Like, they could do it again. They could release one this year, and I'd be happy to listen to it.
yeah, and I mean that's fine.
There's
And
deeper to that.
I'm not like upset about its existence or anything. I'm really not. But if I like had a choice whether or not it should exist or not, I would prefer that it didn't exist. It doesn't mean I hate it or anything, because I don't.
I don't know. I'm glad it exists. I mean, I don't know. This is important, I think, to the context of the band.
If it had been released,
this is what they did before they did that legendary trio from the 90s.
If it had been released in 1989, Anthony, would it bother you as much?
I think that it would be a lot weirder of a catalog if they had if their first album was straightforward thrash and then they had the other three after.
But that's already the case.
Those
That's
are
what
just
this
demos,
is.
though.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's recorded.
I mean, I was
You can hear
listening.
it.
I was listening to Contradictions Collapse by Meshuggah yesterday, and that album is maybe not a lot different, but I mean, it's a pretty thrashy album compared to Destroy, Erase, Improve that comes directly after it. And there's obviously still the thrash influence on it, but I mean, we've seen stuff like that before, and bands going to have really good discographies even with that. I don't know. I think it'd been fine to release it before, but yeah, I mean, the music existed before the three albums, and so yeah, I don't see. I mean,
The
yeah,
three Bungle albums are just like just a really important artifact of music. Those three albums as a unit, and while it doesn't hurt their legacy that they put out this weird re-recording of demos 20 years later, it's just kind of strange, and I don't know. I'm not really that fond of it.
Is it a purity thing? It's like
it's kind of a purity thing. It's kind of a purity thing. It is.
I get that. I get it.
Like, what if there was like a random ass
Isn't that quintessentially Bungle?
What if there was like a Led Zeppelin album that came out tomorrow?
The purity.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. You look out after a snow, and it's like, pure, just like purely, I don't know, just like been unaffected by human touch or something. And then somebody goes and walks through your backyard, you just see footprints, and it's like,
Exactly. That's a good metaphor for how I feel about it.
I get it. I don't agree, but I get it.
Like, what if
I think that's quintessentially Bungle.
Yeah,
I'm trying
to do that.
I'm trying to think of some band I could use as an hypothetical example. I was thinking Led Zeppelin, but that doesn't work because some of the because Bonham is dead. I'm trying to think of some band that has like a small and pretty perfect discography that has been inactive for a really long time. And like, what if they put an album out tomorrow and it was mediocre? I would feel the same way about that band. I wish I could think of a good example, but I can't off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't know.
I look at this as basically archival. you know, you don't, I don't know, you can look away from it.
Yeah, and I do enjoy it. Like I do like it. I think it's a fun thrash album. I don't think it's an excellent thrash album, but I think it's a good thrash album.
Right.
And Patton sounds good on it, and so I don't have like huge complaints about it. It's just weird. It's a weird release.
How about Tool with what the fuck the latest album's called? I can't think of it right now.
Fear Inoculum.
They always had long breaks between albums. I mean, not that long, but
Yeah.
that's not the same. That wasn't like a comeback album. That was just a band that took a really, really long time to make a new album.
I don't think this is a comeback album either.
It's not like it's not really a comeback album. It's a strange
it's a
release.
re-recording.
It's re-recordings of old demos from a band that's been broken up for 20 years. Like I can't even think of anything else similar to that has come out ever. I'm sure there's something, but
That's why it's cool.
No, I mean, look, these are the core of Bungle. This is three guys who have been doing this since they were teenagers in high school together, who made these three perfect fucking albums in the 90s together, and then basically parted ways. I mean, they were involved in a couple projects, like Dunn and Patton did. I think it's
Moonchild
Dunn is
Trio.
on Phantomos also. Yeah. Yes. They hung out with Zorn, but they all went off and did their own thing, right? Now they're much older. They're probably just kind of looking back retrospectively, and I don't know. They're probably reminiscing a little bit, and that's just fine.
Yeah,
I
it's
don't even
fine.
go that far. To me it's just like, oh, you have more songs you could release? Okay, cool. Let's put them out. Oh, they're not good? Okay, whatever. But it was fun that you did it. Thanks for. They're great.
I don't think it's inherently.
I don't think
a
it's
good
that
thing
way.
to
I
do
think
that.
It's really not even deep for me. It's just like, yes, please make more music. That's cool.
No, I don't think
They
that
didn't
band
make
should
more
always
music,
make
though.
new music no matter what. I don't think that at all. I disagree. Although I do see where you're coming from. I don't agree though.
Yeah, I can just
Yeah,
ignore it if I don't like it.
it's worth the effort. If it's a miss, it's a miss.
Yeah.
This isn't. It shouldn't even be evaluated that way though, because it's a re-recording. They wanted to hear the shit they wrote when they were 16, only sounding better. You know, just with better production.
That's what I mean. If you got the songs and you can re-record them or release them whatever way, then do it. Like let me hear that. I don't know. Cool. Yeah. To me, it's not really
Yeah,
deep
I mean,
at all.
this is probably a side of Mr. Bungle that a lot of people didn't know existed, especially if you haven't listened to a lot of the other stuff that they've done, that the guys did outside of Bungle. I don't know. I just have no issue with it. Like I'm not gonna listen to it the same way I listen to the other stuff, but
Well, I just don't think it's as good. Like, I mean, I'm not going to enjoy it as much as I like the other three.
Yeah.
But, so what? I'm still happy to listen to it.
Yeah, I'm happy to listen to it. I like my beef with it is not that extreme. I don't really consider it a Bungle album, although technically it is. I don't know how many people really consider it like a real Bungle album, because I don't really.
I don't even think it technically. It just it is. It is a Bungle.
yeah,
record.
exactly. I don't know what that means.
I guess it is, but like, it's not new music.
Is it that you don't? Is it that you don't want? Is it just that like you don't like to have to look at that name, like when you click on the Mr. Bungle option in your library, you don't want to have to see Raging Wrath of the Easter
those
Bunny?
three albums are just so clean as a unit. It's just so clean and without flaw. I like. Just like don't fuck don't fuck with that. It's like such a beautiful legacy. Don't fuck around with it. It's kind of how I feel.
It's like touching up the Mona Lisa or something. I don't know.
Yeah, you know.
No, I get it. I just don't. It doesn't bother me in that way.
Yeah, I don't know. It doesn't bother me at all.
It bothers me if someone walks through the snow in my backyard and I'm like, why'd you do that? It looked a bit. I mean, in this case, no, it doesn't really bother me.
It only bothers me a little bit. I'm not like going around in my daily life thinking about this. I'm just expressing my feelings about it. We're talking about Mr. Bungle.
I'm not saying that you're neurotic about it or anything. I just
I was really excited about it when it was announced too, and like even when the concept of it was announced, I was really excited about it. I guess I just thought it would be better than it was. And not that it's bad, but I thought it would be better.
I almost bought this thing on vinyl. I ended up not doing it, but I still might. I don't know.
I have the.
Did you think it was going to be? Did you think it was going to be more than just a bunch of thrash tunes?
I thought it would maybe be a little bit more like akin to like some of the more experimental metal music that Patton has made, like with Zorn or with Phantomas. I thought there might be a little more of that. I don't know. And it's fun. I enjoy the tracks on their own more than I enjoy it as an album. It gets a little monotonous when you get towards the end because there's not a lot of variety on it.
Yeah, I mean, like, I hear you. I didn't even listen to this in preparation for today's recording. I've heard it a couple times. That was probably enough. I might revisit it at some point, but it's just it's obviously not as rich as the 390s albums, but it's still these three guys. You know, it is still the core of Mr. Bungle.
It's above average, but not great thrash metal.
Yeah, I would say it's just average.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, even though I disagree with like the choice they made in recording and releasing this. I mean, I respect them as artists, and I'm not saying that like my opinion is the right one, and I'm not like trying to say anything negative about these dudes. I just disagree with how they. I disagree with the fact that they made this, but no disrespect to them at all.
I hope they release 6 more archival releases of purely thrash metal, and I hope each one's worse than the last.
Well, that seems like as good a note as any to wrap up this Bungle episode.
Yeah, let's rank these things, right?
Oh, yeah, shit. I mean, I don't know. They're all equal.
Well, that's not fun.
I don't really care.
We might all have the same.
Gun to my head, I have to.
Yeah, just add.
Well, yeah, Raging is okay. I'll go first. Raging is at the bottom, then probably California at 3, self-titled at 2, and Disco at 1.
Okay, 4 to 1. Easter Bunny, then debut California, Disco Volante.
Yeah, 4 to 1. Easter Bunny, and then. For the longest time, it was California, Disco Volante, self-titled, but now it's 3 to 1, self-titled, California, Disco Volante. Weirdly, California was the one that took the longest. Weirdly, California was the one that took the longest to gel with me. For most people, it's the opposite. But I came to this with maybe a different background than a lot of people did. So
I honestly didn't know Disco Volante existed until last year, so I would have probably liked it if I'd heard it sooner.
What was your 3 to 1 again, Jake? Say it again.
California at 3, then self-titled, then Disco at 1.
Yeah, that was mine for a while, but no, California just out the self-titled at this point.
The self-titled is my favorite. Yeah, when we did this episode last time, spoiling it here, like when we did this last time, I think I had the self-titled at number 1. I think I had Disco Volante at the bottom, so it could change.
Is again. Disco number 1 for all three of us then?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's super unusual for the vast majority of fans of California would be number 1. So that's really, really weird.
Yeah, most people like California the best.
That's weird that it's Disco for all three of us. Vast majority of people you poll would say California.
Again, it's splitting hairs, though. I mean, I like all of them pretty. You can't look away from Disco Volante. You know,
I think it's stunning.
It's hypnotizing.
It's so unique. Like, and I don't think uniqueness is like that important, honestly, in art, or originality. Like, I think those are overrated values in art. But Disco is like a legitimately unique and original album, and I do think that that's really, really awesome. Because albums like that don't come around very, very often.
Historically, the self-titled is really unique, but yeah, I definitely agree. R.E. Disco Volante.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, uniqueness. Like we don't have to judge these three albums on their uniqueness. All three of them are unlike anything else in musical history.
Well, there's comparisons, but yes, as on the whole, yes, they're their own thing.
It's hard for me to pick a favorite of the three of them too. I mean, it really is like they're three perfect albums that are serving different ends.
Yeah, they're doing really different things, all three of them.
Yep.
They all three of them make you feel very differently.
Well, I'd say that about wraps it up then. Mr. Bungle, legends, absolute legends.
Yep, hope they release 6 more albums.